what I would like you to do is to draw a circle or an ellipse and fill it with red. So just a red fill. Give you guys about 30 seconds to get ready. Everybody have a circle? Okay, so I have the object selected. I'm going to look over here in my toolbar. So to recap the toolbar, selection tools, creation tools, modification tools, color tools. Have we looked at some of these color tools already? Yes, we have. The eyedropper, samples color. The gradient tool, positions gradients. This is our blend tool. We looked at that today for the second time. And then we have this one over here. What is this one called? What does it say right there? Mesh tool. This is the mesh tool. Now, instead of clicking here on the mesh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my object menu. And you'll notice that there's an option. What does it say right there? Create gradient mesh. So it's the same feature. It's redundancy. All right, so I also want to look at my object in my layer panel. This is layer 1. What is the object called? Ellipse. It's an ellipse. That's what it says in layer 1. Okay, what I want to do is I want to go to the object menu and I want to select create gradient mesh. Okay, now when I create the gradient mesh, you're going to see that I get this window that gives me options. And what it's doing is it's constructing a network of lines, a grid on the object. And I'm defining how many rows or columns this object is going to have. Okay, so right now it's set to 5 rows and 5 columns. And you'll also notice that I have something called an appearance. What is the default? What does it say? Flat. You'll notice that I have an option that says to center. You'll notice that puts a white highlight in the middle. Or if I go to edge, that puts a highlight on the outside. Honestly, you usually work with flat. I've never used those other options. I don't see why you would use them. But I'm going to work with flat because usually you customize the colors. You want to make the decisions, not the software. But I do want to create a network. And you'll notice that the more numbers or the larger the number I add to rows and columns, the greater the density the mesh has. And one of the things that I should mention about the density of meshes is that the density should be relative to the complexity of the object. And usually a really big density is bad. I normally don't want a really dense mesh. So usually I would think a mesh somewhere between 3 and 3 to 10 and 10 is about as far as I want to go. 10 and 10 being a maximum. That's really dense already. For this first example, I'm going to make a mesh density at 5 and 5. 5 and 5. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now, check out the ellipse. Is it still called an ellipse? No, you'll notice that it's no longer an ellipse. What is it called now? Mesh. So it's no longer a primitive. It is now being understood as a mesh object. Okay, so we have this ellipse that I transformed or converted to a mesh object. Okay, so what's so great about a mesh? Why would I want to do this? Well, remember, it's a color tool. It's a color tool, right? So what it does is it creates a network of lines. And where the intersection of these lines hit, where these intersections hit, there's an anchor right there. Do you see that? There's a little anchor there. There's an anchor there. There's an anchor there. Each one of these intersecting anchors is a placeholder for color. It's a placeholder for color. So to select the individual anchors, I have to go to my direct select tool, the white arrow. And I'm going to click on this anchor right here. On this anchor right here. So this anchor is active, the others are ignored. Let me zoom in. This anchor is active, the others are ignored. So when I add a color to this, I'm going to add yellow to this spot. When I add yellow to this spot, the color will become a gradient. It'll gradiate to the nearest anchor, So it's going to gradiate from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, from here to the nearest anchor. So it's going to create a fan of yellow in this area. Okay, dumb question, everybody. Remember I like to ask them? Dumb question. Is the yellow going to go all the way out here? No, because there's all these anchors in the way. The gradation is from anchor to anchor. All right, so I'm selecting this anchor, and I'm going to click yellow. So you can see that the gradient is going from this anchor to the following one. Right? Let me click an anchor on the opposite side. So I'm going to click an anchor down here. I'm going to add green to it. So if I add green to it, let me see here. Maya, I'm going to pick on you. I like you, Maya. So Maya, is the green going to go all the way out here? I selected this anchor. So no, it's not going to go here. Is it going to go to here? Yep, because this is the nearest anchor, right? What about up here? Is it going to go here? No, because there's an anchor in its way. It's going to gradiate from this anchor to the closest one to it. So I'm going to add a green spot. You see it does exactly that. Okay, so this is a controlled way to apply gradation along a network of lines. So each anchor is a placeholder for color. So we can make really elaborate gradients with this tool. Yes?
How do you select an anchor individually, or like move one of the arms just so it's affecting that side?
So you'll notice that if I go to the white arrow, that's the direct select tool. That allows me to select the specific anchor. Once I select the anchor, I can actually move that portion of the network to a new location. But you'll notice, but you'll notice that as I warp this line, the gradation follows it, right? If I warp this to the right, the gradation is going to bulge to the right. So you have to be very careful when you manipulate these handles to construct custom gradations. But I interrupted you. What was your question going to be?
It was like for the handles,
Mm-hmm.
like how do you select them?
So you'll notice that when I click on an anchor, it populates the handles around them. So all I have to do is with the same white arrow, just grab a handle, and that will allow me to move it.
But remember when we were making the shapes and stuff, like making the heart, and we just wanted the
You wanted to break one to move it on its own?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I want to manipulate and break one handle apart, I have to go to this tool, anchor point tool. So now I can click on this handle and break that one. Now, this example that we're going over right now, I would very rarely do this on a gradient mesh. So you asked, that's why I'm showing it, but I wouldn't necessarily advise it. Okay, so this is the gradient mesh tool. To recap, we created a shape. It was filled with a color. We went to the object menu. We created a mesh based on a network of rows and columns. It created an interior grid. We then used the white arrow to select an anchor along the intersection, and then we added a color based on that. Okay? So, any questions or concerns about this? The gradient mesh is going to be a topic that we discuss again in the future, and we're going to illustrate something specific when we get there. So we will revisit this topic, but with a purpose. So we're going to be illustrating an orange, and we'll use this tool to help us accomplish that.